Enough of that. Now then. Usually every Friday, our food connoisseur Jay Rayner likes to sink his teeth into a nice, meaty food topic.
So what's up with the big guy tonight, Jay?
They wouldn't let me eat any meat.
We hate it when that happens.
Although I'm a committed carnivore, I have absolutely no problem with non-meat cookery. I just think it should be proud of its vegetarian nature, not trying to mimic something else through the use of meat substitutes. As far as I'm concerned, there are no substitutes to meat.
But that's my opinion, and clearly many of you disagree. The market for meat substitutes is currently worth £200 million a year and increasing.
What do you say to heathens like me who regard meat dishes made with meat substitutes as nothing like those dishes at all?
Well, it depends how you cook them. If you're, good at cooking, then you can make them to be very, very similar. None of these products are meat, so they're not going to be meat, but they are close to, and hopefully when you try it, you'll think, that's pretty close.
Some of these meat substitutes, like tofu and seitan, have existed for centuries. Others are a more recent discovery. Mycoprotein, sold as Quorn, dates from the 1960s, when the burgeoning population prompted scientists to hunt for a new food supply. J. Arthur Rank's food company looked to fungi for the answer, taking soil samples from all over the world to find the perfect protein.
And they found an organism called Fusarium, a fungus, funnily enough, in a wheat field in Marlow, in Buckinghamshire, and they found that could be cultured in vats to make large amounts of fungus protein, a kind of protein that could substitute for meat.
It sounds like a very processed foodstuff.
Yes, it's completely artificial, but so's most of the stuff that we think of as traditional. Wholemeal bread, ground wheat, fermented, cooked in an oven, cheese, milk, which you keep until it goes rotten and rancid and lumpy and then eat it. Why should anybody regard those as natural? They're completely artificial. They're traditional technologies. This is new technology.
Now, the thing is, all these meat substitutes are nutritious, low in fat and high in protein. But do I really want to eat them?
It's very well made, but only up to a point.
Right.
I've got nothing against it.
Right.
At all. It's just, for me, tofu has a bit of an insipid texture to it. No. Oh. No, that's quite impressive. Look, I'm going back to second.
You are indeed. I mean, this is, sort of fake meat or mock meat, if you like, but there's an array of vegetarian products out there. And of course, it wills your oyster, as long as it's a mushroom oyster.
There are forecast to be 9 billion people on the planet by the year 2050, and they won't all want to eat meat substitutes.
But producing real meat on the hoof takes lots of resources. There's feed, there's land, there's transport, so the hunt is on to find a more efficient method, not in the fields, but in the laboratory.
The idea is this. You would take, instead of having to slaughter the entire animal, you would take a sample from the back of the animal, from the nicest steak you want. And think of what that is, Jay. That's the cells of meat. So you can take them to a factory or to a plant where you can produce cells in large amounts, like in a fermenter. You would then grow the meat, and in theory, you would end up with as much beef steak as you wanted, tons of it.
So how far have they got with this?
So far, people have managed to culture samples of meat and produce perfectly viable samples of meat, but there are two slight snags. One is that the samples are a few grams in size only, and the second
That's never going to feed me.
Possibly not. The other thing is that the only meat they've managed to develop so far and grow in the lab is meat from a goldfish. It's culturing a complicated community of cells to make meat that is the real problem. You've got to have the right blend of muscle, fibre, fat cells all together to make meat. But the production of meat as we now do it is completely unsustainable. So the economics of it make much more sense. The other thing is, of course, that you're eating meat that hasn't involved the death of an animal. And from my point of view, that would be the greatest single advantage of all.
You see, Alex, the thing is, when it comes to flavour, death is depth.
All I
can say is I would prefer spaghetti bolognese or a chili con carne with Quorn.
Would you really?
I think it's nicer.
All right, get your mouth around that then. I mean, listen, if I'm going to be made to eat this stuff... Shane?
Yes, sir.
I've been sent out, forced to eat meat substitutes. You know, there was some of this that I didn't actively hate.
That's really nice.
Do you like that? You sure you don't want to compare it to the real thing?
This is a vegetarian black pudding, am I right?
It is a vegetarian black
What
pudding.
does that mean, a vegetarian black pudding?
Well, it's a vegetarian black pudding.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't, because black pudding is made from the blood of an animal. But I suppose if you quite... Yeah. Look, I'm trying to be nice here.
I know
You sent me out there to eat the stuff, and
Sorry.
I see its point. But there is a serious issue here, which is that the amount of meat we consume, and I say this as somebody who doesn't really like his dinner unless it's ever had a pulse, the amount of meat we consume is probably unsustainable for the planet. There was news this week of what's called the European Nitrogen Assessment, which says that it's costing each of us £650 a year in damage to the environment, the amount of nitrogen that's produced from agriculture and particularly from livestock. The National Farmers Union have a different view and say the amount that's being used is actually dropping. But the idea of meat-free Mondays, which you've heard Paul McCartney talking about, is probably a good way to go. We do need to cut down on the amount of meat, and I say that as someone who really doesn't want to.
But you also wrote the frog chorus.
Big fan of the show, actually.
I like it.
Yeah, not anymore. There have been successful food substitutes before.
Well, yeah, we've had food substitutes all the way through history. Listen, try it. Would you like a cupcake?
OK.
Would you?
Is this... When your cupcake...
Don't be suspicious
Hold on a
of
second.
food.
There's no meat in it.
No, but there's no meat in a cupcake anyway, so what's the...
Well, that's the question.
see.
You try it, and once you've started eating it, then I'll tell you.
So what... But, OK, what's normally in a cupcake? It's just icing...
Sugar, flour.
Butter.
What do we have to do to this man to get
Have a
him to eat? I just
Come
need to see it go.
OK.
Oh, look, I'll help. All right, the point about these is that they're made with sugar substitutes.
All right.
And there have been...
That is awful.
Yeah, I do.
How do they make sugar substitutes sweet without the sugar?
Look,
So what's
there
this?
are chemicals which, like aspartame and saccharin, which are many, many times sweeter than natural sugar and have very few calories in them.
It's very buttery. Very
like that?
buttery.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah, but
I'm
you-
not interested in anything that doesn't have fat or meat in it.
Oh, you've changed.
Well, have
No,
one of
no.
those
Chris,
then.
What?
have a cupcake. Just before you start running the marathons, you'll need one of them.
But Jay,
talking about the marathon.
as a toned and elite athlete yourself,
Yeah.
what tips have you got?
By the way,
Did you just
No,
laugh?
I'm going to... I don't know how you run with that hair.
Jay.
How do you run with that hair?
he's been carving up for years.
Is he really?
Yeah.
It's no race.
That's not entirely
What
fair. I
advice
do go
have you
to the-
got?
Oh, that-
All right, the advice, and really, you need advice from me, obviously, because I've been there. It's all about, just before the race, it's all about carbs. It's all about complex carbohydrates, about eating a lot of pasta and eating a lot of rice. However, it's also about something else, which is when you're running, you're going to need a bit of a sugar burst. And the recommended thing from the British Dietetic Association,
tell us.
it is...
It's a bum bag.
It's a bum bag containing jelly babies. Have one of those.
Yay! Is that a fact?
Yeah, well, they're a very good source of instant sugar, and while you're running it... Look, they've all got jelly babies. Here, catch.
Yeah.
Oh, marvellous.
Very good.
Giles, you want one?
This is proper.
Well caught, Giles.
I just like throwing food. It's a very, very simple way to... I mean, the fact they look like babies and you can bite their heads off is neither here nor there.
Okay.
It's just a very good way of dropping sugar into your bloodstream.
Now, your One Show bum bags are 1 of 100 each, OK? Limited run,
Limited edition.
no eBay action, OK?